If you wanted to enhance the light here in this image, how would you go about doing that? You might draw a linear mask and raise the brightness, or do the same with a radial mask. The problem here though is they brighten everything in their path, including the parts of the image that wouldn't naturally be hit by the light source. Enter what I like to call subtractive masking. Okay, so we have the image here edited to the point that I like it, but I want to enhance the light and shadows in this image. So what I'm going to do is start with a radial gradient. I'm going to feather it out all the way and then draw it nice and big to match the shape of the light. What's important here is that I position the middle outside of the area affected by the light. The reason for that is because I want the light to fall off similar to how it does in real life. So if it's falling off in two directions, it's not going to look quite natural. From here, I'll raise the exposure up to the point that I like and maybe bring up a little bit of contrast. But you can see here that the radial mask is also affecting the building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this minus button over here and then go over to the object selection tool. I'm going to make my brush nice and big, and then I'm going to paint over the building here. It doesn't have to be perfect. The computer's going to do all of the thinking for you and clean up those edges. So we can see from here, if I hit O on my keyboard to bring up the mask, it's now only affecting the ground. But of course, I also want to take it off the back of my subject, which also wouldn't be hit by the light. So again, I'll go for that object selection tool, much smaller this time, and paint him in. And that will subtract the subject from our selection. You can see by the red in the image here that it's only the ground being affected by the mask. I'll hit O again to turn it off, and this little eyeball icon lets us turn the mask off and back on, and you can see how that's working. The cool thing about this concept is I can also use it to deepen the shadows. So I'll start with a linear gradient, again to follow the direction of the shadows in the frame, and drop that exposure down. Again, of course, I don't want it affecting the building, so I'll go over to that object selection tool, hit minus, click objects, make that brush bigger, and then paint over the building. And that will remove that from our selection. It's not always perfect. I'll take a smaller brush, paint that in, and clean up those edges. And there we go. I'll also bring the contrast up the same way I did bring the highlights up. I find that just boosting can sometimes wash the image out, so I usually like to add a bit of contrast back in too. Again, I'll click the eyeball here, toggle the masks off, and back on. And you can see what a natural result it creates. All right, so let's go on to the next image. We have a different kind of situation here. We have this dark hallway, the end is bright, but I want to boost the light to fill the space more and draw the eye to the subject. So again, I'm going to start with a radial gradient. I can position the center right in the middle of the light source because of the perspective of the image, and I'm going to draw it quite large. I'm going to bring that exposure up, but we can see that it's making other parts of the image that aren't naturally hit by light stand out too much. So we'll go into the object tool here and start painting things over, like this bucket, this bicycle, this trolley, this styrofoam on the ground, and in the corner over here. You can get quite detailed with these masks. I'll work on this curtain as well, and of course our subject at the back, because I want him to stay in silhouette so we have the most contrast possible. I'll hit O, and you can see how that mask is working on the image now. I'll also bring those highlights down so that the outside isn't totally blown out. And this looks great. At this point, I can just dial things in with masks as I normally would. I'll go in and add a linear gradient from the bottom, drop that exposure down a touch, and then do the same thing on the left side over here. Drop that exposure down and make one more radial gradient to bring out this graffitied wall a little bit more, because we brought the light source out and this is being hit by that light source. So we can bring it up as well and it'll still feel natural. I'll go and toggle all of the masks off and back on again, and you can see how much more dramatic the light feels, but it's still done in a way that looks much more natural as opposed to me just slapping a radial gradient in the middle and brightening everything. Okay, let's go to our last image. We have this interior shot here, and the inside of the building is quite bright, but I'm focused on this structure on the outside. I of course want my payoff to be brighter so that the eye will go there. So I'm going to use the same concept and follow the light, starting with a radial gradient, nice and large, rotate it to follow the angle of the light. And again, I have the middle here, this dot, positioned outside of the area that I'm going to affect because I'm going to remove it. Notice how the red color here dissipates as you get towards the edge of the mask. This is feathering, and that's going to create a more natural light fall off, just how it does in real life. I'm going to raise that exposure up to the point where my payoff looks nice. But it's of course also affecting the inside of the building, which I don't want. So I'm going to hit that minus button. This time I'm going to use a linear gradient because I can follow the straight lines. I'll start from here and just draw one with a tiny feather, and I'm going to repeat that same thing. Another linear gradient from this line over here, and another linear gradient from this side, as well as from the bottom. If we hit O to check out where our mask is working, we can see that it's just hitting the structure at the back. I can bring that exposure up a little bit more, and of course I can go and refine these lines too by grabbing from the middle of the mask and bringing it over just so it cleans up these edges here. Again, that red part is the part of the image our mask is affecting. So I'll hit O to turn it off and toggle between before and after. And you can see how much more that pops now. And that's it. Subtractive masking is a really simple editing concept, but it will completely change how you enhance light and shadows to produce a more natural result. I hope you learned something new in this video. If you did, drop a like down below, and also let me know in the comments if there's something in photography that you're struggling with or you'd like to hear me talk about. Subscribe if you haven't already to make sure you get the next video, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.